Coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana, Studio One at Books and Brews, featuring today's funkiest, weirdest, and downright strangest business people we can find. This is the Funky Boss Show.
Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to the Funky Boss Show. I'm in the studio today, Studio One here at Books and Brews, with my man Brian Sweany. What's up, Brian?
Oh, nothing much. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to have you here. You've been coming around Books and Brews here since probably ground zero, dude.
Day one or day two, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we met, right? I feel like we really did meet day one or day two.
Yeah.
And you were like, bro, this ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
You're in trouble, man.
I remember rolling in and you had a lot of English breakfast ales.
Yeah,
and I said, dude, there's a lot of hopheads here in Indy.
I was like, I'm gonna make it work. We're gonna be the multi-brewery. I'm behind the bar brewing all by myself. So I knew right away that you were my kind of dude because you come in with the honesty like that. And I'm like, oh man, this is my kind of guy. But more than that, you're in the audiobook industry.
Yes, indeed.
But you're also a writer yourself.
That's true.
So the Funky Boss Show, what I like to do is get people on that do things a little different, you know?
Okay. Yep.
And I knew right away from that very first moment where you're like, bro, you're in trouble. I'm like, Brian's the kind of guy I can tell already. So you've been coming around a long time, been knowing each other for a real long time. So I'm really excited to sit down and record a couple minutes here with you just to get the background on you. And I get to ask a couple questions maybe I've never asked at the bar too. And also it's a little bit more of a captive. We're in here talking. But tell me, first of all, I'm really interested in this show. One of the things that I like is mission statements. But why? Why are you a writer, dude? Why did you decide to write your stuff?
Well, a lot of it had to do with where I came from. Writing for me became kind of therapy. I was late. I was late to writing. I was not.
Really? When did you start?
Well, I've always been a big reader. I was reading Jack London when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I've been a speed reader since about the fifth grade. So since I was 11 or 12 years old. So
really speed reading.
Yeah.
Huh?
So I think I've lost a little bit of it, but
yeah.
At my peak, I was probably about a 110 to 120 pages an hour guy.
Wow. Yeah.
And
yeah. So double. I mean, I think the average person that reads a lot can probably kill 40 to 60 an hour.
Yeah.
You know, and that's because that's. So I mean, yeah, you're kind of the look at words as pictures kind of guy.
Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. There's little tricks you learn along the way. Like when you read dialogue, you don't read the helping verbs. You just read the dialogue.
Right.
Because you don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You skip it. Yeah. You figure it out later.
Exactly. You figure it out in your head. But anyway, so always been a big reader, so that helps. But I really didn't get into writing until college. Quite honestly, I learned that I could write poems to get chicks.
well, that's the you know what's funny about that? That's the origin though of poetry.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't think anyone would have ever put pencil to paper if that there wasn't a reason for it.
Yeah,
and I mean that's the whole point is being able to express emotion
exactly
that you can't get out verbally, right? And
yep.
and one of the largest emotional parts of our lives is, of course, significant other courting, all the falling in love, all those things.
That it is, yeah. And so it was Sister Stella Gamphier, Sister Stella, my English writing teacher in college, who cornered me after a writing class one day, and she said, "Brian, you're abusing your gift."
Wow.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "I see you writing all these schmaltzy love poems to girls, and you're a good writer. And you better do something substantial with that gift." And even then, I really didn't take her warning seriously, but it was kind of tucked in the back of my head. And then, as they say, truth became stranger than fiction, and more painful than fiction. And I lost my father in a car accident.
Oh, man.
When I was 21 years old. It was a freak accident, which kind of began this sort of brief but pretty intense spiral in my life, and very introspective, very painful. Nearly didn't come out of it, but I did. And one of the things that got me through it was journaling,
really?
Writing about my pain, writing about what I was going through.
Right.
And then life turned around for me. Met the love of my life.
Yeah.
Engaged, married, and while she was finishing college up at Eastern Michigan.
Yeah.
In Ypsilanti.
The Eagles.
Yes, the Eagles. The Hurons. She was the last of the Hurons, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they switched over.
Exactly.
They're going away from a lot of the American Indian.
Yeah. And I kind of sat back and I said, well, I have like about 60,000 words here of something.
Wow.
Let's see what we can do with that. But the thing is, it was so emotional, so personal that I could never quite invest myself in it. So I set it aside and I said, well, let's see if I can just write a novel.
Yeah.
Because I've put a lot of words down on paper, so I've developed that skill set. So let's see what we come up with. And I came up with this kind of sci-fi, socio-theological fantasy novel called The Messiah Project.
Okay.
It was kind of terrible because it was my first time writing a novel. I still have the manuscript, but it.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I don't think I've seen that.
No,
one.
No. So yeah, it's sitting in a big box in my closet right now, but it had to do with it was this near future novel in which this group of people try to force the second coming on the world by cloning Jesus.
Okay.
And
I'm in.
And I'm
ready. I'm ready for it.
It was
the
fun.
The world probably wasn't ready for that.
They probably weren't.
Whatever. How many years ago that? But today, man, that's straight to Netflix.
Exactly.
You got a series on your hands.
But so I wrote it, but it taught me how to be a writer.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gave me the courage to sit down and look at some of this more personal stuff.
Yeah.
And I went back to that book, and really it was so personal and had so many people in my life that I'm like, I can't write this as a straight memoir. It has to be kind of a fictionalized, semi-autobiographical novel.
Through the looking glass kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's how Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride, my published novel, came to be.
Right. But at first it was a couple different ones, right?
Correct. Yeah. It was even that route to publication was pretty problematic. What happened was I had originally written the manuscript, and it was out on submission, and I was approached by this little Australian publisher called the Writers Coffee Shop.
All right.
And the Writers Coffee Shop was looking to expand their audience to a male reader.
Okay.
They were the ones that discovered E.L. James.
Okay.
So
really,
yes.
All right.
So they published her originally before she got huge.
Yeah. 50 Shades of Grey.
Exactly.
In case people listening, I don't know. Yeah.
50 Shades of Grey, and they took my manuscript and they said, we really like it, but it's big, and our readers, they like their books quick.
Because it was. Were you shopping? Because you had a couple books, which was kind of like a whole. So were you shopping all of that together?
Yeah, originally, yeah. So originally it was one book, and they said, well, this is too big. What can you do to slim it down? And I was kind of, at that point, was pretty married to the material and kind of knew the story I wanted to tell from beginning to end, and it really was one story.
Totally.
And I looked at it, and then I kind of started playing around with it, and then I was like, well, I can divide this into two books.
Right.
And just because thematically and chronologically some things happen to where you can kind of put two of these, it's two sagas, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I divided into two books. The first book was Exotic Music of the Belly Dancer.
Right, yeah.
And then the second book was Making Out with Blowfish.
Making Out with the Blowfish.
Yeah.
I got them both. I have them both still in my in my room in my house.
Yeah. And so those were divided, and so that's how it worked out. And they published those books back to back, and it was a pretty cool experience for a first time published author. And they did some interesting things publicity wise. But then after E.L. James moved on to a bigger publisher, there was this kind of big legal issue around who got what from the original deal, and this Australian publisher was a really small publisher to begin with.
Right.
And as someone who works in publishing and has seen small publishers kind of go down this road, I know what can happen.
Right.
These little publishers go bankrupt, and you have all these authors whose intellectual property rights are stuck in bankruptcy court.
Yeah, dude, that's terrible.
So for me, I just called him. I called him, and I said, "Look, I thank you for all you've done for me.
Right.
I know you have some issues right now. I'm going to make this real clean and simple.
Right.
I'm going to send you a letter that you can sign that reverts the property, that reverts these rights back to me as the author,
Yep.
and we can go our separate ways. No harm, no foul. And they were great. They were very gracious. I think they were going through a lot of things, so this was really easy for them.
And then that's what led you to publishing it together as Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride?
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, that was a story within a story. Here I am in my day job. I'm director of acquisitions for the world's largest independent audiobook publisher.
Okay, which is who?
Recorded Books.
Okay.
So what that does, what my job entails is meeting with publishers, editors, agents, and negotiating the audio component of a book right.
Okay, so the book is already published or going to be
Exactly.
published, and then you're looking at the big ones and trying to go in and
Correct.
You're the one in the front lines negotiating those contracts.
Correct.
So rad.
Yep. And so what you have, when any big book sells, you
Right.
have hardcover rights, paperback rights,
Ah.
movie rights, serial rights, foreign rights, and
audio
rights.
Ah, gotcha.
And so
And
that's
all
what
those, and they all have to be negotiated independently.
Yeah.
Even the hardcover and
Well, what the big publishers, especially these days, try to go into an agent with a big pile of money and get all rights.
get them all. Oh yeah, get them all at the same
Yeah,
time.
and a lot of times they'll use that as a wedge issue, where
Wow.
like audio's gotten so big, especially in the last few years. I mean,
Yeah.
we've surpassed. I would argue we've surpassed ebooks as the golden child
100%.
of
haven't-
the subsidiary rights.
I mean, I'm a huge reader,
Yep.
and I've read a couple of books in the last couple of years, but I've listened to dozens of audiobooks.
Yep. So what happens is, I negotiate for those rights when and where I can. And at one point, I was meeting with this Los Angeles independent publisher, Rarebird Books, run by Tyson Cornell, great guy, very savvy publisher. And Tyson calls me and he says, "Hey, Brian, I see that you're the audio publisher of Chuck Palahniuk's latest Fight Club author for
Right.
everyone out
Yep,
there."
yep.
And I said, "Yes, we're the publisher of his latest book." He goes, "Well, there's a story in there that's a Fight Club prequel. And I'm wondering if we could I know Chuck, so I want to bring Chuck into the studio and do a special LP of him just reading the prequel.
Far out.
But you own the underlying audio rights, so I have to acquire them from you. And for me, that's not something that's going to compete with my full unabridged audio product. That's just free promotion for me.
Right.
And so I was like, "Sure, Tyson, I'll do that." And so we had a couple meetings, and then one day we were meeting in New York, and he was like, "Brian, you seem like a different cat. You seem like you came to the audiobook business from a different direction." I was an English major, was never a business guy.
Right.
And I'm an English major that somehow ended up making money. And so,
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so on the executive side of things. But he said, "So, do you write?" And I go, "Yeah." And I kind of replayed for him the story I just told you with Writer's Coffee Shop and all that. And he goes, "I'd like to see that manuscript."
Far out.
And then he looked at it and he came back to me. He goes, "I'll publish that book and we'll do it in a single volume the way you wanted it to be. And he goes, "Obviously those titles that, while funny, aren't going to go for our readers."
Right.
Because it's the Chuck Palahniuk reader a little bit, I think.
100%, yeah.
Fight Club reader,
Yeah.
the nihilist
Yeah.
type of reader. And so we kind of racked our
That's what attracted me to you immediately too. Like I felt that. It's funny because I'm a big Chuck Palahniuk, right? Palahniuk.
Yep,
I can never pronounce because
Palahniuk.
I never say it out loud.
Yeah.
So like in my head, I think
Yeah,
it's
I've
different.
seen it just murdered
Sure.
Palahniuk. And,
Yeah, exactly.
The Cult of Chuck. Just call him
Just
Chuck.
Yeah, dude. I'm a big fan of his. So yeah, that energy drew me to you right away, just from a friendship level. But that's really awesome. So one other question for you. So first of all, buy the ticket, take the ride.
Yeah.
I also want to slip in there before my question is that one of my favorite moments ever at Books and Brews was during your launch party, or at least for the Indianapolis area, maybe.
Yep.
And you had it here, and my band plays. My band's 90s hip hop and the ukulele, and the place was flooded, and everyone
was
had a great time.
fantastic.
And you sold a ton of books.
Yeah, we had I had told Tyson, I'm like, I don't know. I know a lot of people in the area, and Jason does a good job promoting at Books and Brews. So I said, why don't you just ship 200 books here just to be safe, and we were working with Book Mamas,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was the bookstore.
Right.
They're now, I think, Irvington. What are they? Irvington Book
Yeah,
Vinyl and Books. I think
Right, yeah, they
that's their
closed
name
for a
now.
minute, but I think they came
Yeah,
back
yeah.
as like, something like that.
Yeah, but anyway, they did a great job getting the word out. So I said, just send me, just send 200 books to the store, and we'll see what happens. And we sold 192.
Dude, that's crazy. That is so crazy.
I mean, you even see normal, like, I would say I'm not abnormal, but let's say a generic commercial writer will come through the Barnes & Noble Carmel is usually
Right.
the site for all the big shows.
Totally.
They'll sell 50 to 100 copies and think that's a good day.
100%.
And I was like, wow.
192, man. That's so awesome.
So that was a really great day.
It was such a fun night too. I was so pumped to be a part of that. So anyway.
Yeah, but the title, buy the ticket, take the ride.
Yeah.
As I was saying, we were trying to figure out, what to do, with these crazy titles.
Yeah.
The Blowfish and the Belly Dancer, and I said, well, I'm a huge Hunter S. Thompson fan.
Yeah.
My company produces Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in audio.
Yeah.
And I always love that quote, in that book about, it's something to the extent of, life sucks. All you can do is buy the ticket, take the ride. That's the general gist of the title.
Totally.
And this book, which kind of encapsulates this kid, this bumbling and stumbling kid from, soups to nuts, as they say, from 15 to 40, kind of, figuring out his shit and just kind of trying to do the right thing, but always doing the wrong thing. For me, that just kind of summed it up.
Yeah.
And so it became buy the ticket, take the ride, and opens with the Hunter quote, and that's ultimately what led to the title and what led to the book launch and everything else.
That's awesome, man. So where can people buy it?
Anywhere. So it's available on all the digital retailers. It's available at any bookstore. It's available on audio. It's available, so you can go to Audible. You can go to Audible. You can go to Google Play. You can, and what's so great is,
did you read it?
No, no, that would be a little bit too intimate.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I have a little.
Is that
bit,
weird for you? Have you listened to it?
Yes.
Is it weird for you to hear someone else say your words like that?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, if anything, it gives me a little bit of separation.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
in addition to losing my dad, there it delves into some pretty serious issues
Right.
Around abuse.
Yeah.
And I had a person in my life that had no business being around young men, boys, and that's another thing that I had to wrap my brain around, and
Right.
kind of, and really the book kind of helped me deal with that.
Yeah.
So I think for me to really read that would be pretty
Totally.
intense.
Yeah.
So I like that separation, but when we were going about casting for the audiobook, I've been in the audiobook business since 99.
Okay.
And so a very long time. And so for me, I knew all these narrators, and I'm like, well, there's one guy I'd really like to take a shot at this, and we've been longtime friends. His name's Peter Burkrot. He's got like 500 audiobooks under his belt. I think he just hit his 500th audiobook.
Wow.
You will probably know him as the kid in Caddyshack who had the rake pointed at his throat during Bill Murray's Dalai Lama monologue.
No kidding.
He was also the kid that got bounced against the sign. He goes, "What does that say?"
Oh my gosh.
And he said, "No bare feet." And he goes, "What does the other thing say?" "No fighting." And and that was ad libbed. And but he has some. Yeah, we should get Peter in here on it.
100%,
And
man.
if you want some Caddyshack
I would love
behind the
that.
scenes stories,
Yeah, I would love
they're
that.
pretty funny.
Dude, that's so awesome. I'm going to hit you with one thing here that I heard recently.
Okay.
Because the talking of the process of writing it, you mentioned therapy on the top about that's how you got yourself into writing. And I was listening, the source doesn't really make as much a difference, but it was talking about dealing with emotions of pain primarily, but like and the idea of putting it down in writing And then the idea for the person talking was like, then just crumple it up and burn it. And then if you still feel emotion, like repeat the process until you don't. And people, push back against him and said, well, how are you going to say like, you're just going to write it down and emotion's going to come out? And he said, well, look at it this way. When your kids give you a drawing, like, is it a good one? Would you pay for it? Well, of course not. It's a lump of shit, right?
Yep.
But do you throw it away?
Yeah.
Well, why not?
Yeah.
Well, so if your kid can put love and happiness and all these emotions into a paper, like, why are you pushing it back against the idea that the ability to get the pain and some of the issues that you deal with out of yourself works just as well?
Yeah, that's fair. For me, I could never get myself to throw it out. Because I thought it was kind of okay. I didn't think it was total shit. I thought, I was like, there's something here. There's a nugget here. And for me, in addition to it being about therapy, it was maybe somebody could read this.
Yeah, dude.
And literally the first or second signing I had after the book launch here at Books and Brews, somebody came up to me that I had known since high school and said, Brian, you were always kind of like the jock, the homecoming king.
Right.
You were like big man on campus, and I never, and I just kind of assumed a lot of things about you.
Right.
And I never assumed you were a guy that was going through this and this and this.
Right.
He goes, but even now I see you, and you're still kind of the big man on campus in terms of life of the party, fun,
personality,
yeah, smiling, and I went through some of these things, and it's wrecked my life, and I don't know how people can get through this, but I see you here, being a dad, being a husband, being a good guy, and I feel like I misjudged you, and B, just reading your book makes me think, hey, I can get to the next day.
Dude, that's so fucking awesome.
And that was cool. I'm like, I could not sell another copy of a book ever, and this has made the writing all worth it.
Man, that's why I like to dig into the why, and boy, isn't that the coolest thing? So,
it is.
So what's the so is there a next book for you? Is there a next thing?
Yes, there is. In fact, we're kind of in the middle of it right now. After I had finished kind of the publicity tour and all that with Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride, I started going back to kind of my first love when I first became a reader, and that was fantasy.
Yeah, dude. Me too.
And I remember the first time I read the Asimov, the Foundation trilogy.
Yeah, man.
And obviously Lord of the Rings and all that great stuff, and the Dune books. But anyway, I was playing around with this idea of YA fantasy, so young adult fantasy,
right?
Because I'm also a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, which by the way, like I had a hard time defining for a long time, which is basically just the protagonist as a teenager.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, like the content doesn't have to be. The content can be very wild and adult oriented, but it's just that the protagonist is a teenager.
Yeah. If you look at, actually, I always say that if you look at the Harry Potter books,
right,
J.K. Rowling. As we talk about, last names, rhymes with bowling, people. Does not rhyme with bowling.
Yeah,
bowling.
I make the same mistake too. I just claim Midwestern. I'm just Midwestern.
But anyway, no. If you read that series, you could argue that those books progress from middle grade to young adult.
Almost to like straight horror.
Exactly.
I always like to say, especially like those later movies, the only thing stopping it from being a straight horror movie is just a whimsical soundtrack.
Exactly.
If you add
exactly
over the top of those scenes, it's straight horror. But it says like and all of a sudden it's young adult.
That's fantastic. But yeah, so I had this nugget of an idea that I want to, as you were saying, a teen protagonist.
Yeah.
But I think I might want to write as a teen female protagonist, first person.
Yeah.
And here I am, a man in my 40s, thinking he can do this. And so I put about 30,000 words down to paper. And I said, well, I think this is not terrible. And sent it to my agent. And the agent who originally repped me, he also represents Michael Connolly, James Lee Burke.
Like, far out.
Very male suspense.
Okay, sure.
And Andre Dubusse III, literary, like big time, important writers.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a sense that he wouldn't get it, but I owed it to him to read it. And he came back to me and he's like, I don't get it. And, and I was like, well, Lucas, you've been great, but I really think I need a female agent.
Ah, gotcha.
Because
to get it.
To nail this voice, to tell me when I'm being full of shit or when I'm pandering.
Totally.
Any of those things.
Totally.
So
just to connect to the why a little
exactly,
bit too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have 3 teenagers.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
including a daughter who's now 20.
Right.
She was about 18 when I started kind of fiddling with
and there's
this.
part of the connection too, right?
And she has a lot of friends who are readers and English majors and writers, and they've kind of been my readers as well.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I've bounced a lot of ideas off them. So I found this agent, and she's since really helped me with these days. What you send out to editors is as polished as possible.
Right.
It used to be 10, 20 years ago, you could send things out on proposal almost.
Yeah, right.
Or send a rough draft to somebody.
Where people are like, maybe you shouldn't waste your time.
Yeah, exactly. And editors would be like, I see something here. I can work with this.
Right, exactly.
Whereas now, it better be polished, and they'll come at you with, well, what's your you being in the marketing side of things for Books and Brews, what's your platform?
Right.
What's your platform?
They're going to look you up on Twitter and see how many followers you have.
Exactly. And so again, we've gone back and forth. It's completed. It's
awesome.
It's pretty clean. We may do maybe one more revision before we go out on submission.
Yeah.
But it's the first in a projected trilogy. It's called The Gods of Homecoming.
Sweet.
And
far out.
Yeah, and I have the all 3 books are outlined, so I know where this story is going to end.
Yeah.
And then the second book, I have got about 20,000 words down, but I've kind of reached a stopping point to where some of the edits my agent is suggesting could affect the direction of that second book.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so I've kind of put that on hold until we lock down this first book.
Yeah, let it kind of marinate. Maybe even listen to, and so this is probably this is the first like trilogy thing. Do you think there's some sort of market direction that might change your mind? Like, if there's debatable points and people all of a sudden come back and be like Kathy, was it Bates from Misery is like, how could you kill that? Like,
well, that's the
like your ankle's broke. By
it's funny you say that, because one of the things that one of the issues in this first book is, I don't want to spoil it too much down the road when this book comes out, but imagine if J.K. Rowling had killed Ron at the end of book 1.
Right.
That's kind of right now what I'm dealing with.
Right. So well, not unlike, depending on the vastness of your universe, not unlike killing, spoiler alert, Ned Stark.
Exactly. True.
In the first book kind of thing, right?
Good point. Yep.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I read those books in the 90s.
You're like 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when that first season came out and that happened and people were losing their shit.
Right.
And you're like, so you did not read the books.
Right.
And they're like, nope. I'm like, well, if you ever see an episode here in the next couple seasons called The Red Wedding, you may not want to watch that.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to like that one. Yeah. Oh man, it's true, because I think oh no, I take it back. Well, I don't want to make it into Game of Thrones, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I think it's a good way of writing in today's era, your reaction to this, because we have gone with Hollywood, jumped the shark so far into good guy wins, bad guy loses, that the sense of suspense has really dropped. And I think that on the grand scale, the Game of Thrones model that was, of course it was old, right? Because he wrote it, but like books don't do that. They don't kill. Like, I mean, Ned Stark is the protagonist for the you would dare to say, the opening scene, right? It's like fade in Ned Stark, right? Yeah. So you don't kill the fade in character right away, and it throws the whole thing into chaos. So it was, I thought it was great because there's all true suspense. Whereas in a lot of stories, sometimes you get to a point where you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? And then you kind of come down to like, well, they're going to win. Yeah. Like in the back of your head, you just know that good guys win, bad guys lose.
That was my problem with Infinity War.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I loved it. I'm an MCU fan.
Sure, me
I've
too.
loved all the movies.
Right.
But people were like just so overwhelmed by Infinity, and they were like, how would you rank all your movies? And people would always put Infinity War up there. I'm like, I'm not putting Infinity War up there. And then they were like, why? And I'm like, well, because it's going to be all undone.
Right.
In Endgame,
Yeah.
it's a fake out,
Right.
And so all that emotion is,
just like fading into dust
exactly.
instead of actually dying.
It's a bit empty, and the deaths, semi-spoiler alert, in the Endgame are pretty damn real, and they're pretty intense.
Right.
But Infinity War, it was like the most expensive, over-the-top prologue ever.
Right. It's so funny. Yeah, I know, it's 100% true. Yeah. So is that part of your angle with the new book? Is like putting, like throwing that on its head a little bit? There's no good guy, bad guy?
Oh no, there's very much a good guy and a bad guy. Probably the angle of my book is it's much more. And it's Arthurian, first of all. So it's Arthurian mythology set in contemporary 21st century America.
Okay, far out. I can dig that.
Times.
Yeah.
But it's more along the lines of, there's good guys and bad guys, but it's more along the lines of, say, a Buffy, say, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina,
okay.
or even like a Riverdale, where
yeah.
you kind of just put fantastical elements and real life teen problems just
Totally.
in this big blob.
Yeah.
And the fantasy elements exist more so as metaphors for
right.
everyday real teen angst.
Yeah.
Which is what Joss Whedon always did with Buffy.
Right. Well, I think don't you think that one of the reasons that works so well is because when we're living through our teenage years and our lives are so short, the magnification of those 3 or 4 years is like all we know. So like
it's all about that.
Turning it into fantasy, I think, is a perfect metaphor for how fantastical or devastatingly terrifying or how we experience those years.
That's how I came to YA writing. When I started writing it, I did so informed by the knowledge that many readers of Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride told me, I love the first part of your book the most. I loved it. I liked all of it, but that first half of the book, it hummed, it was fierce, he was crazy, he was reckless, and it was because that was the teen portion of the book.
Yeah.
And as my wife will tell you, I do have issues with Arrested Development, and I think that comes out in my writing a little bit. But back to your point, it's because of the realm of experience of those teenagers.
Right.
It's because of the context. It's the context of what they're feeling. Every high is the biggest high they've ever felt. Every low is the biggest low they've ever felt. They're so unreliable as narrators, and that's what I love about them.
Yeah.
I know I need to save the world, but this dude broke my heart. That's all I could think about.
Dude, I love the unreliable because at the end of the day, we're all unreliable.
Exactly.
We're only, it's kind of like the crescendo of 1984 with the rats, right? Like at the end, like we'll all sell each other out.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have a rat that wants to burrow into your face, like
exactly.
I'll turn anyone in.
And that was, and the old the bros before hoes thing. Like I never believed that in my life. Like I would sell out my best friend for a pretty girl at the drop of a hat in high school and college. At the drop of a hat. Yeah. I was like, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go with her. She's hot.
Oh man, so funny. Well, I tell you what, I wanted to shoot another podcast today that was our sarcastic sportsmanship and talked about. But this got too interesting, so I just powered through, and basically I think I'm going to make this into like a double episode.
Okay.
Because this is great stuff. So the last thing that I'll ask is, and one of my very interviewee questions for hiring people at Books and Brews is like, write your future resume, right? Like, where does it go? Like you have this amazing sort of memoir-like fictional tale that is done great. Buy the Ticket, Take the Ride. You have this series that's come out, The Gods of Homecoming.
Yep.
That's coming out hopefully soon, so I can read it. And then where do you see yourself in the writing realm going forward? Do you see yourself sticking with YA or just kind of going with how you feel in it?
I think YA is my future. I mean, in the very near future, obviously, I have to finish book 2 and book 3 in the trilogy. Totally. And I have that, but I also have this idea for kind of a middle grade series, not necessarily boy books, but a little bit more. Going back to me talking about Jack London.
Yeah.
I loved Call of the Wild. I loved how he made animals part of the story, but not in a corny way.
Right.
Like they were actually characters, with human introspection and feelings and emotions, and I have this idea for kind of like literary mashups where you take a couple figures from other books and put them in. So I have this spin-off. This first one is a spin-off that involves some of the animal characters from Jungle Book and White Fang. Kind of meeting up on the road. All right. So kind of a Fox and the Hound.
All right. Yeah.
Type story, but a little more high-minded, a little bigger, a little more ambitious, but still middle grade, like something. Oh, sorry. Banging the microphone. Something. Anywhere from 12 to 18 could read.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's the other side project. But I think I have about at least 5 books in my head that aren't adult, and maybe I go back to that book at some point and make it a duology and write a concluding chapter to the book that the middle-aged retirement sequel, which won't be nearly as interesting. You never know. The guys like Richard Rousseau and John Irving, write about old guys pretty well, and I could, be so lucky to write as well as them. But, maybe there's something there, because I think there's stuff I would probably still need to work through, in those books that I haven't quite worked through yet here in real life. And maybe I'll get back to that. But for now, I'm very comfortable in the Arrested Development phase of my writing career.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll tell you, the last little bit of question before we get you out of here. Thank you so much for coming. First of all, buy the ticket, take the ride anywhere that you can find it. It's all over the place. Is what would you, it doesn't have to be like advice for yourself, but if someone's out there and they're like trying to get started, I got these ideas. I want to be a writer, but I'm in, somewhere in the woods in Michigan, somewhere in the cornfields in Indiana. I don't know if anyone's going to notice me. I don't know if I'm talented enough. What advice would you give to someone that wants to be a writer, doesn't know how to even start?
Okay. Fair questions. I always first and foremost, I always say, just write. That's my first thing.
Just get started.
Just get started. The hardest thing about being a writer, even once you're established, is learning how to write when you have nothing to say.
Interesting.
It's, most writers, when the muse hits them, can sit down, crush out, page after page. That's me. I'm I'm a binge writer. Yeah. I'll go weeks without writing. Yeah. And I got a day job too that takes up 10 to 12 hours of my day. Right. And but so for me it's usually like 11 to 1 in the morning.
Yeah, you just hit the fire.
And
that's easy, right?
Yeah, and if it hits, and if it's really hitting me, that's when things get a little crazy, and I'm writing from like 11 to 4. Right. And not sleeping for days at a time, and but for the new writers, learning how to write when you have nothing to say, and just writing, just kind of writing that bad sci-fi novel that I talked about earlier, taught me more things about writing than any writing class. It taught me how to sit down for, because I had a part-time job. My wife was finishing college, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. Right. But it taught me how to sit down and just write for 4 to 5 hours. Right. It could be total garbage, but it's muscle memory. It's teaching you,
giving yourself a rhythm.
Yeah, teaching you a discipline that nobody can teach really in a class. Right,
got to practice it.
Exactly. But again, everybody comes up to me and says, "I have this idea." Right. And sometimes I try to take it in a very positive way and be very positive about it. But a lot of times it feels like a guy getting off a couch, walking up to a marathon runner and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about running a marathon.
Right.
Because I think I could do it. And
perfect
A,
analogy,
and A, that's pretty audacious,
Yeah.
and B, it's pretty presumptuous, to think that A, you can do it. B, people want to hear your story.
Right.
And really, in a lot of ways, it takes presumption to be a writer.
Yeah.
For you to sit down and say, I'm going to write this.
I got something to say.
I got something to say, and people don't want to say it.
And people want to, hear it.
But so it takes a little bit, I don't know if it's courage or foolhardiness.
Yeah.
But you have to be brave. You have to be willing to take no. In an era of self-publishing,
Yeah.
a lot of writers have lost that.
Yeah.
The editors were the gatekeepers. They were the people who got the stuff and said, needs work, or
Right.
maybe you should consider another career.
The thing that friends and family don't have the guts to tell you, maybe.
Friends and family do not say. And in the self-publishing space, there's a lot of great writers in the self-publishing space who've kind of figured out the math and have
just pump it out.
Yeah, well, they figured out the math, but they've also figured out that minus the publisher, if I can market myself, and if I know where to sell my books, and if I have the discipline to be prolific, to, as you say, pump it out, I can make a decent amount of money because I've cut the publisher out of it.
Right.
That's such a small subset of self-published writers. And then you have this large swath of self-published writers who are just people who can't take no for an answer. And that's you read a lot of this stuff on the self-published space on Kindle, and you go through this and you're like, this is just terrible. So they should not be a writer, and they should have had an editor that has told them no at multiple levels. And that's what I tell people. You have to be able to take no for an answer, because and take it constructively.
Yeah.
And because if you can't do that, you're just like, if you're really married to your voice, that's what will ruin you as a writer. I mean, I had the benefit of, right out of college, I was an editor for 5 years.
Oh, right on.
So I was on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So I know when an editor comes back and says, this is garbage, do this, do that, do this, do that. You'll never hear from me. I very rarely draw lines in the sand with my writing.
Yeah.
Because I know that the editor is there to make my product better.
Totally.
And
they have objective eyes.
Exactly. And at the end of that book at the end of that tunnel is always better than the book that was at the beginning of that tunnel.
Man, Brian, I'm gonna have to get out of here, dude. I want a whole nother episode just on your career in the audiobooks and editing and all that stuff. So let's schedule another time for you to come back.
Perfect.
And we'll talk more. And I want to talk more. I want to talk about the youth rugby thing, which is crazy too.
Something else.
But man, thanks for coming. It's so cool to have you on, just because 5 years knowing you from almost day one to here, it's pretty sweet. And a lot of the stuff is, I mean, I know some of it, but a lot of the stuff I don't know, so I learned a lot of cool things about you today. So thanks, dude. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Right on. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Funky Boss Show, y'all. If you could give me a rating anywhere that you listen to this podcast, it would mean the absolute world to me. Please share with your friends. Tell them that we've got some fun stuff happening over here on the show, and more really, really cool people coming up to talk to about the outside of the box ways they approach business or what they do every day. So like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time. Bye.